Well, hello and good evening. Thanks for joining me on a Wednesday night. Not our usual Tuesday true crime, but we did get a surprise last week. An older case that we had followed for years that was dismissed has been reopened. Well, I shouldn't say reopened because based on what I read, the investigation continued all along and there was absolutely an attempt to going to prosecute and moving forward. They built their case and they have re-indicted on June 18th Barry Morphew, who was arrested on the 20th and he is being extradited back to Colorado with no contest. So I've been following this particular case from the start. It is one of the first ones that I actually started to speak about out here on YouTube after I started my channel. I had been following it privately well before that. As many of you know, I had been always talking about true crime behind the scenes and reading everything I could on certain cases well before I started this channel. And I had no idea that true crime would be a big part of this channel back then. Welcome to everybody coming in. It's good to see everybody. Hello, Grace, Mrs. Cassandra Mippet, and hey there, student. I hope you're doing well. Uh, So let's just get to it. Let's start with the announcement from the 12th district. We've got a lot to cover. I want to get this in an hour. I want to bring you all up to date. This is quite a fascinating case. I will say what intrigued me the most was that in the first indictment in probable cause document that was dropped back in 2021, it was 143 pages. I'd never seen anything like it in a indictment warrant. It was intensive, but mostly circumstantial because in the first case, they didn't have a body. They just had a missing woman presumed murdered in a lot of circumstantial evidence. But they did do a good investigation. Let's start with what's going on now, and then we will delve into the past a little bit in just a bit. The first thing I want to read is the actual announcement from the Chaffee County Sheriff's Office. Chaffee County was in charge of the first investigation and continued to investigate as a cold case all along. Here's the announcement they released just the other day. We here at the Chaffee County Sheriff's Office are happy to announce that Barry Morphew has been indicted by a grand jury for his wife's murder, and he is back in custody on a $3 million bond. We are proud of our staff and law enforcement partners for never giving up. The Chaffee County Sheriff's Office will not be answering case sensitive questions at this time. Please see the below press release put out by the 12th Judicial District Attorney, Ann Kelly. And I quote from Ann Kelly. On June 18th, 2025, the 12th Judicial District Grand Jury returned an indictment charging Barry Morphew with the first degree murder of his wife, Suzanne Morphew. Mr. Morphew was taken into custody in Arizona on June 20th. The 12th Judicial District Attorney's Office will seek to extradite Mr. Morphew back to the San Luis Valley. There will be a media briefing at 6 p.m. on June 20th at the San Luis Valley Department of Fire Prevention and Control located at 1301 West Avenue in Alamosa, Colorado. For those interested, that is already up on the channel. I released the recording of it earlier. It will be in the playlist also. The investigation into the disappearance and murder of Suzanne Morphew had been ongoing both before and after her remains were discovered near the town of Moffat in Sargasso County, Colorado. The investigation team consists of law enforcement officers from Chaffee County Sheriff's Office, the Saguache County Sheriff's Office, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The Arizona Department of Public Safety assisted the investigation team by apprehending Mr. Morphew in Arizona. Federal, state, and local law enforcement have never stopped working towards justice for Suzanne, said the 12th Judicial District Attorney Ann Kelly. The 12th Judicial District Attorney's Office stands in solidarity with Suzanne's family and citizens of Chaffee and Saguache County in pursuing the grand jury's indictment. The 12th Judicial District Attorney's Office will be assisted by the Boulder County District Attorney's Office in this prosecution. The Denver County District Attorney's Office will provide appellate support. The 12th Judicial District Attorney's Office recognizes Boulder County District Attorney Michael Doherty. He has consistently provided essential support and leadership to rural prosecutors with limited resources to pursue major cases and obtain justice for victims throughout the state. To follow this case from this point forward, we encourage you to follow the State Judicial Case of Interest page, where hearings and public documents, including the indictment, can be found soon. And they gave us a link. We anticipate the state judicial will be live streaming the court hearings, and the hearing links can be found at the State Judicial Case of Interest page. This is good news for those of us that want to follow the case, as myself, because I definitely do. But that link actually gave forward the indictment and also the press conference. Also, any instructions to the media that there will be live streaming and all of the expectations that go with it. Thank you so much, Sharla. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for the acknowledgement. Hi, Maya. Welcome. Welcome, everyone coming in. There's a lot to cover in this case. And I'm going to have to do some of the boring parts, like reading you the indictment, because in the indictment, it's going to lay out actually what Barry Morphew is being charged with. Well, we know it's first-degree murder, but how and why is the important part, right? So let's get that up. And then we're going to go over some of the evidence, because boy, do I have files upon files upon files for this case. When I tell you it was a fascination from the beginning, I'm not kidding. Like, I've got every single piece of evidence that they logged, that they released, the whole history. But we'll start now and work our way backwards a little bit. The indictment is only 10 pages. And we'll just go through this. It's going to be the 12th district. It is going to be written in the voice of Ann Kelly. She's filing it. She is the new district attorney for this case. And boy, do we have a lot of discuss about the old district attorney in that office from prior, but we'll get to that. As you can see, the first charge is count 1, murder in the first degree. Here we go. Of the 2024-2025 term of the 12th District Grand Jury in the year 2025, grand jurors chosen, selected, and sworn in the name and by the authority of the people of the state of Colorado upon their oaths, present the following described acts, all done contrary to the form of statutes in such case made and provided, and again the peace and dignity of the people of the state of Colorado, as stated in the account attached here to Ann E. Kelly, District Attorney for the 12th District of the state of Colorado, in the name and by the authority of the people of the state of Colorado, informs the court of the following offense committed on trial in the 12th Judicial District of Colorado. Count 1, murder in the first degree, after deliberation, on or about May 9th, on May 10th, 2020, in or triable in the state of Colorado, Barry Morphew unlawfully, feloniously, and after deliberation, and with the intent to cause death of a person other than himself, caused the death of Suzanne Morphew in violation of section 18.3, 102, 1A of the CREs. Probable cause for count one is as follows. And now we're going to get into the bones of the case. And this is important because we had a prior trial that was dismissed. We have civil lawsuits. We have a prosecutor's office that was sanctioned. We have a district attorney that became disbarred. There's a lot in this case from before. But what we're going to hear now is what they're able to pull together and use in the new case. Now, well, it's still the same case. Let's say the new prosecution of Barry Morphew. At 5:46 p.m. on May 10th, 2020, Mother's Day Sunday, Suzanne Morphew was reported missing to police by her neighbor. The last known person to see her alive was her husband, Barry Morphew. Investigators responded to the Morphew residence at 19057 Puma Path near Salida, Colorado, to investigate the missing person report. The house was locked, and Suzanne Morphew was not home. Her vehicle was in the garage. Her vehicle was in the garage, and there were no signs of forced entry, and her bike was missing. Later that evening, her bike was located down a hillside off a dirt road between her house and Highway 50. The bike was located less than a mile from the Morphew home. On May 14th, 2020, her bike helmet was located 10 meters off the side of Highway 50, approximately 1.5 miles west of the Morphew home and approximately 0.84 miles west of where her bike was located. Barry Morphew was interviewed and told police that he set his alarm and woke up at 4:30 a.m. on May 10th, 2020. He told police that he left at 5 a.m. on May 10th, 2020, for a pre-planned work trip in Broomfield, Colorado. According to Barry Morphew, Suzanne Morphew was still asleep in bed when he left the house at 5 a.m. He told the police she planned to ride her bike that day. Barry Morphew stated that upon arriving in Broomfield that morning, he checked into a hotel before leaving shortly after for the job site. He told police that he received a call around 5 p.m. that night, May 10th, from his neighbors while physically at the Broomfield job site. The neighbors told Barry Morphew that his daughters were concerned because they could not reach Suzanne all day. Barry instructed the neighbors to check the house and specifically to look for her bike. The neighbors reported to Barry that neither Suzanne nor the bike were at the house, and Barry then instructed them to call the sheriff. Police interviewed one of Barry's employees scheduled to assist him in the Broomfield job. The employee told law enforcement that the employee and Barry were not planning to leave for Broomfield until the evening hours of May 10th. They were supposed to drive together. Instead, Barry left without telling the employee. Barry called the employee at approximately 11:18 a.m. and informed that employee that he had left without them. When the employee arrived in Broomfield on Sunday evening, the employee noticed that Barry Morphew had failed to bring the proper tools with him for the job, and the necessary materials for the job had not yet arrived at the job site. Review of the cameras at the hotel and nearby businesses revealed that Barry Morphew was in the Broomfield area for approximately 9 hours and 45 minutes. Of those hours, he spent less than 1/2 hour at the job site. Instead, besides 2 brief visits to the job site area, electronic evidence and cameras from businesses showed him driving around to various locations and discarding unknown items in separate trash cans. Hotel footage then showed Barry Morphew arriving back at his hotel room and remaining inside the room from approximately 12:35 p.m. to 5:55 p.m., inconsistent with his statement to the police. He was in the hotel and not at the job site when he received the call about his wife Suzanne Morphew being unresponsive and missing. In early interviews with Barry Morphew, he told the law enforcement that his marriage to Suzanne Morphew was the best and that the two had a wonderful weekend together. When Barry was asked whether Suzanne would say anything different about their relationship, Barry stated no. Barry Morphew's statements about his marriage to Suzanne were inconsistent with other witness accounts and evidence located. Specifically, investigators learned that Suzanne confided in people that she was unhappy in the marriage in the weeks and months leading to her disappearance. She discussed plans to divorce Barry Morphew with her close friend. She maintained documented notes of problems in the relationship recovered from electronic devices and the physical search of the Morphew home. Suzanne Morphew had been having a secret affair with an old acquaintance who lived out of state. She communicated with him daily over LinkedIn and WhatsApp. Suzanne's last known electronic message to anyone was to that person on May 9th, 2020 at 2:11 p.m., just 32 minutes before Barry Morphew returned to home that day. An overall timeline of the week of Suzanne Morphew's disappearance shows that the disappearance coincided with her daughter, the only other occupant of the Morphew residence, leaving on a pre planned road trip out of state. Because of this, Suzanne Morphew and Barry Morphew expected to be alone at the residence starting on May 5th until either late in the day on May 10th or into May 11th. Suzanne Morphew drove the daughter to Gunnison, Colorado on May 5th to depart with her sister and a friend on a planned road trip. After May 5th, Barry Morphew and Suzanne Morphew were alone at the house. A forensic download of Barry Morphew's cell phone revealed that Barry Morphew had deleted a text chain with Suzanne Morphew from which an image of a single text remained. A screenshot of this single text message was saved on Barry Morphew's phone on May 6th. That image revealed a text from Suzanne that stated, "I'm done. I could care less what you're up to and have been for years. We just need to figure this out civilly." On May 11th, authorities commenced a search of the Morphew residence that spanned several days. The state of the residence and vehicle showed no signs of a break in or an intruder. Even with no signs of a break in or an intruder, law enforcement collected items of potential evidence and DNA swabs. DNA analysis of the swabs collected produced several DNA profile mixtures consistent with what would be expected in the common areas of the home or vehicle. The mixture profiles were processed through offender databases and were compared to the profiles of known individuals who may have been present in the vehicle or the residence. The results did not lead to any stranger or intruder suspects. An expert in DNA analysis testified that law enforcement provided analysts with one of the partial profiles developed from the glove box of Suzanne Morphew's vehicle for further investigation using a keyboard search. This allowed for additional comparisons to profiles in more databases with less stringent quality control standards than the National DNA Index System for the limited purpose of creating possible investigative leads. That expert further testified that there were matches to outside databases nationwide. The term match used by DNA analysis does not mean identical. Rather, a match only means that there were other profiles that could not be excluded at the limited number of loci available from the partial profile for comparison. The expert explained that she then compared the matches from those databases to the partial profile from the mixture on the glove box and excluded those out of state profiles as not originating from the same contributor in all but 3 instances. Finally, the expert explained that just because the profiles from those databases matched at the limited loci available for comparison, it did not mean that any of the people from the out of state profiles were the same person that contributed the partial profile to the mixture on the glove box. Law enforcement investigated those three partial matches obtained from three separate out of state sources and found no connection to the case. Law enforcement located a locked gun safe in the garage during the search of the Morphew residence, and inside that gun safe, law enforcement located a dart rifle or tranquilizer rifle positioned towards the front of the safe. Law enforcement also found packages of New Dart brand tranquilizer darts in the gun safe. The packages of darts included capped hypodermic needles inside of them, which were designed to load the darts. Law enforcement found one of these needle caps in the dryer after the dryer's contents were removed. Law enforcement also found men's shorts among the contents of the dryer that were removed prior to finding the needle cap. The shorts appeared consistent with the shorts Barry Morphew was seen on video wearing on May 9th, less than an hour before he returned to the Morphew residence. No tranquilizer formula was located during the law enforcement search of the home and vehicles. Police investigated numerous electronic devices in Suzanne Morphew's social media accounts, searching, among other things, for proof of life. That investigation revealed that Suzanne Morphew had not communicated electronically with any living person after 2:11 p.m. on May 9th of 2020. Her last possible activity on any account protected by password access was 3:08 p.m., over 24 hours prior to her being reported missing. Records showing her typical use of electronics and social media demonstrated that this was inconsistent with her typical pattern of life in the days leading up to her disappearance. Additionally, witnesses indicated they attempted to communicate with Suzanne Morphew throughout this time frame, but received no response from her. These witnesses indicated that her lack of response was out of the ordinary. Barry Morphew's electronic devices were also analyzed. A download of the infotainment system on Barry Morphew's truck recovered telematics data showing the location and activity of his truck at certain times on May 9th and May 10th. A download of Barry Morphew's cell phone showed additional location information. Based on data from his cell phone, Barry Morphew returned to the Morphew residence at 2:43 p.m. on May 9th. The data did not show his phone or truck leaving the residence again until the morning of May 10th. The download of Barry Morphew's cell phone registered events related to his phone. An expert forensic analyst determined that some of these events were in fact Barry Morphew's phone being turned off during the time frame of May 9th into May 10th. Turning off a cellular device effectively disables its ability to record location information. Specifically, the forensic analyst noted that Barry Morphew's phone download showed it was turned off at 2:47 p.m. on May 9th, only a few minutes after he arrived home at the residence where Suzanne Morphew sent her last electronic communication to anyone. At approximately 10:17 p.m. on May 9th, the phone was turned back on. Barry Morphew's cell phone was again turned off at 4:32 a.m. on May 10th, prior to him leaving the residence on his trip to Broomfield, and was not turned on again until 5:37 a.m. when location information showed him on the road already in the area of Johnston Village, Colorado. Testimony established that the times Barry Morphew turned off his phone corresponded to periods of time of significance in the case where location information was consequently unavailable. Similarly, further analysis of the information from Barry Morphew's infotainment system, the telematics, in his truck showed an irregular gap in recorded activities. specifically from approximately 3:49 a.m. to approximately 8:10 a.m. on May 10th. There is no recorded data registering on Barry's infotainment system. An indication of no truck activity from telematics is inconsistent with other facts developed from Barry Morphew's phone, surveillance footage, and Barry Morphew's statements about his activities on May 10th. Specifically, telematics data showed Barry Morphew arrive at his residence at 2:43. It then registered various other activities throughout the afternoon at the residence until it ceased at 9:52 p.m. on May 9th. The telematics data then showed activities resume 3:25 a.m. to 3:49 on May 10th at a GPS location consistent with his driveway. Barry Morphew reported to law enforcement that he was asleep during that time frame from 3:49 a.m. to 8:10 a.m. on May 10th. The infotainment system or telematics did not register any data despite the fact that Barry Morphew's cell phone indicated the device was in Johnson's Village at 5:37 a.m. on the date on that date, and Barry reported being in his truck traveling to Broomfield at that time. When recorded telematics data became available again in the records from the infotainment system download at 8:10 a.m. on May 10th, corresponding GPS coordinates showed that Barry Morphew had already arrived in the area of Broomfield, Colorado. This gap in registered data is inconsistent with the pattern of telematics data captured in the days and weeks leading up to this event. Sometimes I must say, sometimes when you try to hide something, it just becomes more evident what you're trying to hide. Like, I never understand that about criminals. Yeah. Phone records for both Suzanne Morphew and Barry Morphew were analyzed by expert investigators. The FBI CAS team analyzed phone records for both Barry Morphew and Susan Morphew to determine location information and device usage related to their cell phones. In Suzanne Morphew's phone records, there was no indication of any user initiated activity after the time Barry Morphew returned home at 2:43 p.m. on May 9th, 2020. Suzanne Morphew's cell phone device continued to connect through RTT data with the cell tower that services the Morphew home throughout the night of May 9th into the early morning of May 10th. These automated data connections, however, were consistent with the tower reaching out to the phone to determine its location and not initiated by the user of the device. After 4:23 a.m. on May 10th, Suzanne's phone ceased to connect at all, ever again. Just 8 minutes later, Barry Morphew's cell phone data showed his phone ceased to connect starting at 4:31 a.m., consistent with the cell phone download showing it powering off at 4:32. Suzanne Morphew's cell phone never registered on any towers other than the tower consistent with the Morphew residence from the time Barry Morphew returned home at 2:43 May 9th to the time it ceased activity altogether at 4:23 a.m. on May 10th. Despite searches for the device, Suzanne Morphew's cell phone was never found. Police interviewed people that knew Barry Morphew prior to his move from Indiana to Colorado in 2018, and these witnesses told enforcement that Barry Morphew was a deer farmer in Indiana. Several individuals told law enforcement that Barry Morphew used a specific tranquilizer called BAM to sedate and transport deer on his deer farm. Barry Morphew admitted to using BAM in both Indiana and Colorado. Specifically, he admitted to using BAM in Colorado as recently as April of 2020, stating that at that time he had tranquilized a deer from the breezeway of the Morphew residence. Hold on, I'm going to take a drink really quick. Yeah, right? That ain't sus. And Mrs. Cassandra, thank you very much for posting the evidence one that I did with Jay. The you know, that There's a whole playlist and that has all the evidence from the first trial, and we had a great time covering this. I just want to take a quick sip before there's only a couple more pages. But here's where it gets really, really interesting because all of what I just read you before is evidence that was documented in the first part of the investigation before they attempted to go to trial for round one, before they discovered her body, and things got really, really interesting. On September 22nd of 2023, human remains were found in and around a shallow clandestine grave in Sagachi County, Colorado, near Highway 17. The remains were found a few hundred feet down a dirt road off of Highway 17. This location was less than an hour south of the Morphew residence by main highways. The remains were determined to be those of Suzanne Morphew. The majority of her bones were recovered. Many of the bones were significantly bleached. Along with Suzanne's bones, law enforcement recovered a cancer report and items of clothing, some of which were consistent with bike clothing Suzanne was known to wear. There was no visible perimortem trauma observed. A board certified forensic anthropologist, a botanist, and an entomologist all analyzed the remains, and several observations were noted. There was a distinct lack of bug activity, which was inconsistent with the remains having decomposed at that location. The clothing items lacked evidence of decomposition, which was inconsistent with Suzanne Morphew wearing the bike clothes at the time her body decomposed. Additionally, there was a lack of animal predation on the bones. There was only a very small amount of desiccated soft tissue found on a few of the bones, and there was no hair mass located. All these features would have been expected if this had been the original grave site where decomposition occurred. The forensic anthropologist opined that, based on these factors, it was unlikely Suzanne decomposed from a fresh body to a skeleton at this location. The El Paso County Coroner's Office conducted an autopsy. In addition to the standard toxicology testing, the coroner's office conducted additional toxicology testing at the request of law enforcement for the presence of a chemical mixture known as BAM, or the combination of butyrophenol, azapirone, and medetamidine. Well, I probably mangled those, but you get it. The chief toxicologist tested Suzanne Morphew's bone marrow for the presence of BAM. All three of the individual chemicals that compromise BAM were present. Additionally, the metabolite for butyrophenol was present. The presence of the butyrophenol metabolite eliminated the possibility of post-mortem BAM contamination. The metabolite's presence also indicated that her death was not immediate following BAM exposure because Suzanne Morphew's body had begun to metabolize the drug before she died. The coroner's office determined cause of death and manner of death as follows: homicide by unsuspected means in the setting of butyrophenol azapirone in medetamidine intoxication, aka BAM. A pharmacologist and medical doctor testified about the toxicology testing done to determine the presence of BAM in Suzanne Morphew's remains, about the chemical compound itself, and about the possible effects of that compound in humans. The expert explained that the toxicology testing done by the coroner's office met scientific standards of reliability and accuracy. He further testified that BAM is a chemical mixture of three specific compounds used as a tool for sedating animals for medical treatment or movement. Back in 2020, In the years leading up to Suzanne Morphew's disappearance, BAM was sold by only one company in the United States and could only be obtained by prescription from a veterinarian. BAM must be administered into the bloodstream through intravenous or intramuscular injection to be effective, as the skin and GI tract do not absorb it effectively. BAM does not cause sedation instantaneously, but takes several minutes to take effect. BAM is designed not to be lethal and comes with reversible agents in the prescription kit. However, BAM is not FDA approved for any human use. For that reason, there are no scientific studies available that address the possible effects the compound would have on humans. The pharmacology expert testified that the compound would render the recipient wholly immobile, vulnerable, and unable to resist any constriction to the recipient's ability to breathe. Records were obtained for BAM prescriptions related to Barry Morphew. Records were also obtained for BAM prescriptions for all persons within the counties and adjacent counties to where the Morphews lived and where Suzanne Morphew's remains were located. Those records showed that Barry Morphew obtained and filled several prescriptions of BAM while living in Indiana. And Barry Morphew's last purchase of BAM by prescription was in March of 2018. Barry obtained multiple kits that each contained multiple doses just a few months before the Morphews moved to Colorado. Records further showed that no other private citizens or private businesses in any of the surrounding counties had purchased BAM prescriptions from 2017 to 2020. Colorado Parks and Wildlife and the National Park Service were the only entities that received prescriptions of BAM in those counties from 2017 through 2020. Investigators learned that each of these government entities enforced tight regulations to monitor the BAM prescriptions, storage, and use, and none of the BAM from those agencies was unaccounted for. Ultimately, the prescription records show that when Suzanne Morphew disappeared, only one private citizen living in that entire area of the state had access to BAM: Barry Morphew. All offenses against the peace and dignity of the people of the state of Colorado. Then the grand jury interned the indictment, and he was actually going to be held on $3 million cash only bond. And if he does come up with that $3 million, he can't leave the state. He'll wear a GPS unit, surrender his passport, and compliance with mandatory probation order until trial. That was the indictment. That, yeah, bleached out bones, but she did not come to rest at that place. The body was moved there. And you know what? The body was actually redressed with the clothes that she did not actually decomposing, trying to make it like she was kidnapped off her bike. Oh, hello there, Garys. Welcome. Welcome, Couch. It's very sus how the body was found. At first, when the body was found in 2023, I thought for sure that recharging would happen right away on Barry Morphew. But it seems like they took the investigation and they really wanted to dot their I's and cross their T's. And I don't blame them because, well, let's talk about a little bit of history now. Okay. With Barry Morphew's case, it was actually going to trial. Linda Stanley was the head prosecutor at that time. And she, unfortunately, and several other prosecutors, made quite a few prosecutorial mistakes during this case. Much of their case was gutted when it was discovered that they were failing to meet the timelines for discovery to the defense for key information. So basically, the cell data, the truck data, and several other things were tossed out just for timely filing, not able to when the defense found out. But also, the DNA that is spoken of in this indictment was also discovered back then. And Linda Stanley's biggest offense was their failure to disclose that DNA evidence to the defense. They probably thought because it did come up with people from out of state, who knows? But it was exculpatory, and that is a big violation. And the whole case was dismissed in September of 24th of 2022, I believe, 2024. It was dismissed, tossed, with the ability to refile should new information come up. Now, this is what is important. So the body is discovered, and we know we're going to go forward. They definitely have a tighter case. I mean, you guys heard all that evidence, right? It's not really, although some of it could be coincidence, this, that, or the other thing. When you look at it as a whole, when you look at totality of evidence, it's a pretty good case. Now that they have the body, which is even more sus, but they went the extra steps with the autopsy. And once they found, well, they did have that gun and that dart cap. So they knew they were looking for something. Okay. What's not mentioned in this indictment, what was in the previous one, was that the cell data also showed pinging in weird locations all outside the house, as if Barry was chasing something outside the house within that first hour that he was home. He said he was chasing a chipmunk because they are pesky little things. Prosecution seems to believe that he was chasing Suzanne Morphew, that he had shot her with the dart and she was running for her life because it had not paralyzed her yet. This case is so interesting. When we first covered it, my friend Jay from True Serial and I went back and forth on a 143-page indictment that I thought was quite sus and quite thorough. But he said no body, no case. He wasn't going there. All the circumstantial evidence in the world was not going to convince him of anything if there wasn't a body. Now, I had pushed back on that because I've seen plenty of murder cases come to trial and verdict of guilty without a body. Yep, I think he was chasing his wife. Yep. The cancer report definitely helped them to identify the bones. They sure did. They sure did. Exactly, Mrs. Cassandra. This is what I want to know. Where was her body all this time? I wonder if we're going to find out, you know? And they were taking their time on getting all that evidence. And I'm glad they did, because now that you read the indictment and you find out that the only one who had access to the drug that's in her body that led to her demise was Barry Morphew. How does he argue that? With the dart gun in his safe, being the only one who purchased it? Is he going to claim that with him right there, somebody broke in, unlocked his safe, stole his dart gun, used it to inject his wife? I don't know. That all sounds a little difficult to do right with him there, you know? And although a cap for the device doesn't really mean much, a cap in the dryer with the shorts you were wearing that night, well, that makes it a little more sus, does it not? But that's the thing. Everything looks so sus, but they've got to tie it up. And here's where it gets interesting, because the cell data and the truck data Although even when it's on is incriminating, he bothers to turn it off for certain periods of time that make it even more incriminating. Because unfortunately for Barry Morphew, while he had it turned off, there's plenty other outside cameras in documentation of where he was. And he, unfortunately, gave contrary information to the investigators about where he was. I mean, why do you have to go to so many dumpsters during the day when you're supposed to be on a job site? And you didn't even bother to bring the tools to the job site or the materials, and you forgot to pick up the worker or actually tie that loose end up. Did you think that because they worked for you that they would lie, or they just wouldn't bother, or it wouldn't be a big deal? All these little pieces, you know? And in the first investigation, in the finding of the bike, which was on a hillside, upside down, from the get go, the investigators thought it was staged. They looked and saw the way the bike was. If that actually was an accident, the rider of the bike would be severely injured. The body would be somewhere near there. Well, if it wasn't actually put there from an accident on the bike, then somebody tossed it there. And why would they do that? And then in processing the evidence, it was stated that it looked like the bike was white for fingerprints. You didn't even find Suzanne's fingerprints where you normally would. I mean, there was some, but it did look like it was cleaned up a bit. And then we have to remember that the first thing that Barry said to the neighbor was, check for her bike. You know, why would he say that? Was it because he was really concerned that she was out riding her bike? Or could it be it was because he had already planted that evidence to look like that? He wanted to make sure it was discovered. Because, an alibi isn't any good or a plausible theory unless you get people to think about it. Hmm. You see, the problem with the first investigation, which I remember quite well, is that Barry talked a lot to the investigators. A lot. And every time a new piece of evidence was discovered or he was approached about it, his story changed ever so slightly to include that evidence and come up with a plausible story that wasn't actually very plausible. I mean, we all know that chipmunks are very, very small. We all know that Barry Morphew is very, very large man and a hunter. Are we really going to believe that he ran around that building chasing a chipmunk for several minutes? A man with dart guns and all. Another time he said that he thought he was looking after a raccoon. When confronted about why he said he went one direction and his GPS clearly is telling him he went somewhere else, he said he was confused that maybe he had saw a deer or something and went that other way. Being a hunter and all, he wanted to check it out. Or perhaps he was out there shooting a raccoon. He was an avid hunter. Their den was full of trophies, the heads of deer and antlers. And he said when he came from Indiana to Colorado, it was like fortunate because with BAM, he could shoot these animals and sell these antlers. And even though it was illegal, it was something he did regularly. And Liz, I agree with you. The kind of work Barry did, construction, letting transit workers in vehicles, is common. Exactly. And that was her vehicle that they found this out of state. But when they did track that DNA, because we're going to talk about that DNA, which was a problem in the first trial and got the whole thing dismissed based on the actions of Linda Stanley and the prosecution team. Two of the other prosecutors were sanctioned severely and investigated. Linda Stanley lost her job, became went on trial for all of these misdeeds and was disbarred, lost her ability to practice law based on what happened in this trial. Because of it, Barry Morphew decided to sue the whole county, put a big, huge $15 million civil suit against the county and every law enforcement, everybody involved, which was tossed as well as the case in September of 2024. Not only was the case against him tossed, but another judge threw out his case because although the investigation had issues, it was not done with malice. Law enforcement investigated thoroughly and came up with probable information that he would be guilty of this charge. So it was not a malicious prosecution, it was a faulty one. It had errors made by the prosecution team, but not the investigation itself. So that judge threw it out, and Barry didn't make any money back, but he was free. But he wasn't free from possible prosecution later. And this became a cold case, but it was clearly still being investigated the whole time. So, not necessarily cold, because according to the 12th district, the 12th district judicial district attorney, she actually says that they were investigating the whole time since they found the body and had not disclosed any of this information yet because of the ongoing problems in the other case. That had to all be wrapped up. And so here we are from September 2024, when everything was dismissed, to June of 2025. We finally are going to go into another trial with Barry Morphew. Now, he did not waive extradition. He's coming back right away. He's going to have his arraignment. I would assume he's going to say he's not guilty, and we're going to have a trial. As far as we can tell, his daughters, as they were in the first trial, are totally behind and support him, even though the daughters know that Suzanne would never leave them. The one daughter lived at home and stated that she thought it was very odd that her mother was not there, for Mother's Day. And even though Suzanne was having an affair, it doesn't mean she wouldn't be there for her daughters. And Barry Morphew saying that their relationship was perfect when there were text messages to her sister and her friend saying completely the opposite. And he didn't know who she was communicating with. He also was investigating the person she was in an affair with, who was married and who had children, who I'm not going to mention their name or drag them in again. They were completely cleared. No access to Suzanne. They were not even anywhere near the state. Don't have anything to do with them. And as a matter of fact, they are the last person that spoke to her. They exchanged photos and flirty talk right before. He knew a lot about her fears of Barry. He knew that she was afraid to be alone with Barry that week. So did her friend. She had mentioned it. And why would Barry Morphew delete a text message chain with Suzanne? He didn't delete anything else on his phone. What was in that text message exchange? Could it be her request for divorce? Could it be her accusations of him cheating also, which she said that they did, in which there are some accusations of, but not proved. He was on, Madison, that famous dating website, and he did get involved with someone right away, Shoshana Dark, who also had issues during the first trial, with showing up at the house after Barry sold it to retrieve a package, being in the yard and climbing around on things. A lot of very, very sus activity there also. I mean, what kind of a package was delivered to the house that they just had to get? It was really weird. And why did they have to do it under the cloak of suspicion instead of just calling the new owners and letting them know a package was erroneously being delivered there? The whole case is getting very, very intriguing because, well, the body was moved before it was discovered. And why would Barry Morphew, if he is the one that moved it, why would he want the body to be discovered with clear evidence of him being the only one with that tranquilizer in the whole area? Or did someone that Barry confided in moved the body? Could it have been the girlfriend? Could it have been an employee? Could it be that the body was just discovered absently wherever it originally was? And that person in good conscience decided to put the body where it would be discovered by everyone, but didn't want it discovered in the original area for some reason? Could it have been an act of consciousness by someone who's very suspicious of Barry Morphew? I have so many questions. What about you guys? Like, I have so many questions. You know what, Grace? You're right. He does think he's smarter than everyone else. And, I think we've all followed quite a few true crime cases. And isn't it always the one who tries to navigate the narrative, who tries to control the interviews and all, the one that's talking the most to the investigators and trying to appear to be so cooperative, but they are changing their story as they go. Fortunately for Barry, they were paying attention from the get go. Something keyed them in, the investigators, right away. The bike, him being conveniently away, but asking the neighbor to check for the bike, having a prepared story on what he thought happened almost immediately. That's all very sus. Most people are just worried, like, where could she be? They're not coming up with plausible theories within 30 minutes of talking to the investigators. Like, that's just crazy. I do too, Liz. And it does seem like this prosecutor is going to be very careful. Oh, just because, just the time that they took before bringing it to the grand jury. In even the difference in how the indictment is laid out, a simple story versus the big complicated 143-page one from before. But yeah, yeah, I agree. Mrs. Cassandra, I agree about these two. The phone not pinging anywhere else is not a good look. Exactly, because he turned the phone off. And when you do turn your phone off, there's evidence of it. And then you turn it back on, it sells times. And if they can prove that he actually turned the GPS off in the vehicle somehow, that's going to be even more damning. And I'm sure experts are going to be able to do that. Now, I'm going to give you guys a couple of articles that have all of the evidence pictures from before, but I'm also going to just go over just a couple. Whoops, I meant to remove that. I'm going to go over just a few of the pieces to show you what they're talking about as far as evidence. Okay, first of all, this is Suzanne and her two daughters. She loved her daughters. She stopped working as a middle school teacher to raise her daughters. She was a stay at home mom. She was well liked. She wasn't very involved in the community at this point after moving from Indiana to Colorado, but those that did know her, her neighbors, and the things that she did participate on, everyone just had nothing but glowing statements about Suzanne. Okay. And as much as an affair while married was used to try to discredit her, it actually didn't really come off that way too much because, well, the way that they found out about this affair was that, first of all, here's the bike. This is the location that it was found out. That's the bike after it was removed. But up there, do you see how it's just tossed up there? Well, first thing Barry said is she probably had an accident. Well, like if you had an accident and your bike ended up there like that, like you'd be really like physically damaged. And then it was, well, maybe somebody kidnapped her while she was out biking. And well, it looked like somebody just threw that bike up there. That is what the investigators thought from the beginning. They searched the water, they searched the fields, they searched everywhere for Suzanne. This was for days. This is the pen that was found next to her bed on the nightstand. This is a recording pin. Suzanne was trying to record evidence of Barry Morphew abuse or admitting to an affair. She was planning on a divorce. She needed evidence as to why, because everybody just thought everything was so perfect between them. Because she wasn't the type to go out there and show it. She wasn't the type to talk about it regularly. She was pretty private about it. And she knew how things looked. She was kind of reserved about it. And she did talk to her sister and her friend, and she did talk to her lover about it. And she was actually trying to record evidence. But what she did record for the police afterwards and the investigators was her affair. There was on there indicating a conversation that she had with the person she was having the affair with, which led to his identity and led to actually the investigation to have him cleared. So it couldn't be used as he being the culprit. Or that she ran off with him, which was another thing. Maybe she just couldn't take it anymore and she just decided to leave. I don't think she would leave on Mother's Day, neither did the investigators. And once they talked to the other party and knew that he was married with children and had not started a divorce or anything and was trying to keep the affair from being known, it was not likely that they were running away together at the time. Plus, they found no travel, no arrangements, and he is still where he was. So Suzanne wasn't just missing, she was probably gone. She did not run away. This was the last picture, proof of life, and the text message that she left. And that was the copy that was on his phone. This is all from the evidence files from the first case, which I assume will be in the second, but has not been documented yet as such. But we're going to find out during trial, right? Okay. In investigating the house, this is the door jam on the way into their bedroom. Barry said that there was never any altercations in the house, nothing. Like they had a very peaceful relationship. Susan was a good soul. They had actually had dinner that night. They were in a good place. They made love. Everything was perfect. So the investigators are asking, how does the door jam get cracked? Looks like somebody pushed this door open. A locked door opened and cracked the door jam. He's like, oh, I don't know. I must have been there from before. Well, they asked the owners before they asked the house if there was any damage to the door jams before. And they said no. Also, suspiciously, Barry Morphew had wounds on his arm, looked like scratches, somebody trying to get away or get from, and on his hands. And they were documented also. And if there was he had no explanation for those. He didn't really speak on how he may have gotten those, maybe because they were in such a great relationship, maybe during the lovemaking, who knows, but they look like somebody trying to defend himself. That's what the investigators were thinking. Here's the running around the house data from the cell phone pinging that, this is where the pings were on the outside of the house where Barry Morphew is running around, where they believe he possibly was chasing Suzanne after he shot her with the dart. They did a lot of investigating of his car. Why did Barry Morphew take his license plate off? I mean, that's normal, right? Along with turning off your phone and turning off your GPS. That is the cap that they're talking about that they found in the dryer. A dryer full of clothes that included the shorts he was wearing the day before. This is the dart gun that they found in the safe that uses those dart pellets. This is their front room with all the animals that show that he was an avid hunter. This is a family photo. You see big cats and, quite a few trophy animals, even a bird there, a pheasant. This is the proof of the text messages uh to, I believe this was to the sister or to the friend, talking about how it is not such a perfect relationship, talking about being afraid, you know, talking about everything, about how unhappy she is. He wanted to know if she had been talking to anyone about their marriage, like friends or family. He didn't want her associating with anybody or giving any information about their personal details. That's normal, right? Barry Morphew dropping stuff off into a dumpster. He went to I think a total of 5 different locations with dumpsters, a McDonald's, several hotels, a side road, to drop bags of stuff off. I wonder what. Hmm. You mean like all the incriminating evidence, maybe? Yeah. But he did save the bike clothes and the helmet. Huh? I mean, he put the helmet in one place, the bike is in another, but the clothes that he said that she wore mostly to go biking, he made sure he kept. I mean, they're on the corpse, but they weren't on the corpse while the corpse decomposed. This I find very odd. This is the inside of Suzanne's car. This is where they did get the DNA from the glove box. And again, more evidence of him being in dumpsters near the hotels and where he was walking out. They actually have video of it all. Of it. There is just a lot of circumstantial evidence against this man. And when I read the first indictment, I will admit that I actually thought it was pretty good case, I thought he was a free man too, but they did have the ability to refile. And I'm kind of glad, Liz, that they did. I'm sure he thought he was a free man, although he wasn't completely out from under the cloud of it because it wasn't dismissed without the ability to retry him. So there's that. There's going to be a good legal battle on what evidence comes in and what doesn't. Last time he had some excellent attorneys that used everything they could and successfully made him a free man temporarily. Well, we're going to see. Hey, Teacher Damien, thanks for joining us. It was the chipmunk, Barry. Duh. Exactly, Grace. What an excuse for a hunter, right? The chipmunk did. It was the chipmunk. Yep. He would have been better off saying a bear. It would have been more appropriate for a hunter, or even a raccoon. That's a pesky animal, also, you know. But anyway, I've got plenty of evidence, but what I want to share with you is this article here that kind of gives a timeline of everything that's happened to date. And then I have another one that has some great photos in everything in regards to all of the hotel pictures. I mean, too much for me to copy everything. You know what I mean? But there's all these images in here of the previous evidence. Now, the reason that I'm giving you this article is just familiar what they had before. Some of it's going to be able to come in, okay, but it's going to be a fight back and forth because it was excluded in the first trial. But this is a new one, new prosecutor, and the evidence is the evidence. As long as they follow through with discovery and all of that, and there's no very violations, because it was not indicated as not appropriate, and because there was no investigative errors in the collecting of it, okay, it should be good to go forward. I've been researching it since he got arrested. And basically, the evidence should be okay because it's not tainted that much by the prosecutorial misconduct. That was all in the reporting of the evidence, not in the gathering of it or acquiring of it. It didn't violate any of Barry Morphew's rights when they did that. So the evidence should be still solid as long as it's submitted into the court appropriately and with proper procedure. But we'll see, because you know darn well any good defense team is going to use that first trial in the prosecutorial misconduct to try to get rid of as much as they can against Barry Morphew, because the way I'm looking at it, this is a whole different case and it's a better case. How do you get out from under the BAM accusation? You're the only one in the whole state with access to it that can't actually document what you used it for. That's not keeping records on how you use it. Everybody else has solid records. That is going to be, oh, pretty hard. Pretty hard to get out from under. I'm saying he comes up with all these elaborate stories, but comes up with nothing for the scratches. Oh, the chipmunk. Yes, maybe it was the chipmunk. Although, like, there was three in a row, like fingerprints in, like, unless the chipmunk like was in a really weird position. But I guess it's possible. You're right, Grace. He should have come up with some excuses for those scratches. I'll have to dig deeper and see if he mentioned it anywhere. But as far as I could find, he had no explanation for that. But I'm still digging. After all, it's an older case. Anyway, if you're part of my library, in in the Morphew room, pinned above will be the link to where they keep the high profile case for Colorado, which will give us all the updated filings and all the updated news on it. Also, notifications of hearings and etc. But there's also a link to the Google Drive of all the information I have from before, which is all the filings, what happened with Linda Stanley, and all the evidence and things that was done. Um, Below, we do in this video, we have a link to the playlist for Suzanne Morphew, which the very first time that we talked about it, Jay and I, we went over all the evidence at that point. It was an very interesting conversation. And then, of course, there are plenty of true crime and legal updates where Suzanne Morphew's case was part of the update, and those are all listed too. So we're going to use the same playlist as we go forward. Okay. The only thing different is if it goes to trial, I may make a separate trial playlist just to keep the previous proceedings separate from the current case so we don't get confused. Because remember, we have to see what the jury's going to see. Right now, we have all this extra information. We don't even know if they're going to be able to use the prior prosecution in this case. It could get banned as being too prejudicial. We don't know, but it's going to be interesting either way. Like, I am very, very interested in following it. And I hope that you'll all join me. I do. But on that, I'm going to end for the night. I do hope that you'll all like and share. And if you're not already, follow me on Twitch and Kick, where I'm trying to build up a platform over there and I'm streaming at the same time, or to join the YouTube subscribers. And, if you do become a member, either on Twitch or YouTube or the Patreon, we'll send you over the Discord link where you can find even more information on all these cases as we gather them well before we even get to talk about it out here. And plus, we do a bunch of other fun stuff there too. All right. In the meantime, y'all have a great night. Don't forget, we'll be back on Friday with an update on P. Diddy and his trial, which had their charging instructions today, and they'll have closing statements tomorrow. And by the time we talk on Friday, the jury should already have the case. Although maybe not, because the judge did say, and wait till you hear this, closing arguments could be 4+ hours for each side, which could go into Friday, which means they might not get the case until Monday to go over jury instructions. So the judge kind of put a little bit of a warning out there. And I do want to say this before Friday. All of these YouTubers saying that charges were dismissed against P. Diddy are incorrect. The only thing that was dismissed were some of the factors in proving the racketeering. Remember, we all talked about them having to prove at least 2 criminal acts for a racketeering. for the RICO charges? Well, there's a list of about 12 that they went for. Then all they did was say they're not going to pursue three of them because it's too iffy on the solid evidence on whether they're guilty. One of them being arson. Although they talked about the incident with Kid Cudi, the arsonist was unable to tie it directly to Sean Combs. So, of course, to make it easier for the jury, they're not going to discuss that in jury instructions. One of the other things was aiding and abetting the sex trafficking. And the other one was going to be the coercion and kidnapping of Capricorn Clark because they could find no physical evidence that Sean Combs actually held her against her will, except for that part about the gun. But the other part about having to take the lie detector test and all of that, there was no collaborating testimony. So for those 3 points, they want the jury to look at the other 7 that they proved, and they're taking the 3 that are kind of iffy away because, well, that's just smart. Because why give them some reasonable doubt for 3 when you got a positive on 7? Let's focus on the 7 that we know we proved, and we only need 2. They're just making it easier for the jury, giving them less to have to dig through. But it's not dismissal of charges. It's dismissal of it's not pursuing incidents in relating to support the charge. A whole big different thing. But I just felt I needed to say that because my inbox is full of oh my god, P Diddy's gonna walk. And I'm like, apparently people out here don't know how to read because that ain't what's happening. And I'm sorry that people are misleading you with these big clickbait, you know, headlines and thumbnails and all this other. But no, he's still charged with the first 3 original charges. Racketeering, conspiracy to commit racketeering in the illegal enterprise under the RICO Act. Okay. Sex traffic, human sex trafficking, in prostitution, sex trafficking across state lines for the purpose of prostitution. All 3 of those charges still stand as indicted, and he's going forward. It's just the underlining offenses that support the RICO charge that they eliminated 3 that they're not going to pursue because there's not as much evidence on them. That's it. So basically, I gave you part of my Friday update already, but I just felt for everybody that was kind of confused about all this stuff out there. I didn't want you guys to go crazy. He did make the judge laugh because he told the judge he was doing a good job. The judge said, "How you doing?" And he said, "How are you doing, Judge? I just wanted to take the opportunity to tell you you're doing a really good job." And the judge chuckled. He said, "Oh, yeah, thanks for that." Kind of in an offhanded kind of way. It was actually a kind of a weird, actually, conversation. I also wonder if Barry's daughters think he may be guilty now. I'm really curious to see how this plays out, Liz. I really do. They've been supporting him all along, even when the case got tossed, even when his other case got tossed, even when the body was found. Um, but because it was an ongoing investigation, the autopsy results, they would all be able to be informed of that. So I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, he does look guilty, doesn't he? But it's really kind of odd to have only one person charged in a RICO case. So I guess it's going to be like I can't even go there because it's going to be on a jury, and juries do what juries do. It is it is very hard to believe your father could commit the murder of your mother, especially, they're older, they have a lifelong of history with the two of them. Um, Suzanne really did not want to express any of these concerns to her children. And on the surface, everything they looked like the perfect couple. They really did. And so perhaps the daughters had that perception also. Sometimes people don't know what's going on behind closed doors, right? Yeah. So on that, everybody, have a good one. And I'll talk to you all very, very soon.